Hello, and welcome to Talk in the Corner. My name is Darmin De'flern, and I'm with John Ballistic. Say hello, John.
Hey guys, I'm here. We're ready.
Okay, so I got some notes, and I'm going to sort of introduce the show to everybody. Both of us belong to a group on Facebook called The Original Music Makers and Listeners Corner. And yeah, rock on there. It's basically for independent, mostly independent or semi-independent musicians, or people who make original music, people who want to support that music. And I think it's one of the best groups out there. What do you think, John?
I agree. Definitely the best group out there.
Just from the sheer amount of involvement from the community, there's people commenting on videos. The admin is very active there, whose name is Laura Guerra. I believe that's the way to pronounce it. And she's posing questions or challenging us to write covers or make a song out of a list of random words. So it's quite a lot of fun. So I just want to mention Keith Eastwood, what do they call him, a monitor there, and he's also does a podcast called Talk in the Corner. So it's basically one you can listen to on your iPod or your computer, or listen to it like an MP3, and basically he does one is an interview format, and he also does like a review of different music that appears on that group, and I highly recommend you check him out on his YouTube site. Is excellent, and I will be honest, I think the quality of music on it is pretty exceptional. I'm really surprised the quality and sometimes the production as well of the music there. What do you think?
It's a very talented group. I listened to a lot of stuff from that group. You and I've talked about that before. Definitely a lot of talent and worth checking out.
I just shout out that Keith Eastwood is probably one of the really gifted natural podcast hosts as well. He's got the Irish charm going for him, and yeah, it definitely comes over as very charismatic. Just like to the other moderator, that's the word I was looking for earlier. The other moderator is TJ Johnson on that Facebook group. So, as I said before, my name is Darmin De'flern. My guest today is John Ballistic. The way this format came about is Laura Guerra, the admin of the Original Music Makers and Listeners Corner. It's quite long. She asked whether people wanted to do like a face-to-face format where there's interviewers and interviewees, so people out there can get to know little-known bands or solo acts. I volunteered to be an interviewer, and also John Ballistic was another person who agreed to be an interviewer. And to sort of get the ball rolling, I asked John if he wanted to be my first experimental subject. How do you feel about that, John?
Feel great, and I think it's awesome you chose me, and I'm ready to talk. Looking forward to this.
Excellent. Okay then. So before we go into the music or anything, the main theme for the show, do you want to just briefly say who you are, where you're from?
John Ballistic. I'm playing a band called Poetry and Commotion here in Denver, Colorado, United States.
You do like the solo stuff as well, or is it just all band?
No, basically Poetry and Commotion is me, myself, I am the band. Whoever drops in, and basically it's my show.
All right. So you basically get like guest musicians?
Rarely, very rarely. Poetry and Commotion's kind of a newer project, so we haven't played anywhere yet. but I had some people co-write with me. I've had a couple people guest, and looking forward to doing a little bit more of that in the future.
I volunteer for that as well. Adding something to music.
Love to have you. Well, it's almost like a collective of sorts at the point, but with me being the main focus and oftentimes the only focus. But we could talk about a little bit more of that later.
I did a bit of research on you from your Facebook profile, and I noticed you like two films that I like. The first one was the Star Wars, I assume it's the Star Wars trilogy, and the other one is This Is Spinal Tap. And I gotta say, The Taste is excellent. What an excellent film. Spinal Tap is had me on my back, and the music is good as well.
Oh, for sure. Required watch, I think. I usually watch Spinal Tap just once or twice a year just to see it again. It's one of those handful of movies that I just go back to every once in a while.
Yeah, I don't know why they haven't sort of followed up with that type of format again, like, because at the time, I don't think there was anything really like that out there. If you watch the movies at the start, you might not even realize that this, it's a send-up or anything, because some of the stuff that they're coming up with is so true to life to the bands and the roadies and everything like that.
Right. Like I said, almost required watching for new traveling bands or just bands in general.
Or people want insight into some of the hilarious stuff that goes on backstage, and if something can go wrong, it will go wrong.
The less glamorous side, as they call it.
So just go through a couple of other things that I noticed on your Facebook profile. Now, I'm not sure how do you say that? Is it Acrid Baker Studios?
Acrid.
Acrid, is it? I thought it might be acrid as in hot, but it's acre, is it? As in plot of land.
Acred is in a plot of land with a different twist to it. Basically, acred comes from back in my younger days. Little bit of slang. If you were acred, then you were 3 sheets to the wind. You were having a good night. You were very drunk, or something of the sort. The Baker speaks for itself, kind of goes along the same lines. And when I was a kid, probably back in high school, we used to joke around about being Acred Bakers, etc. I always thought that would be a good name for a band or something of the sort. So basically, that's the name of my home studio. It stuck with me all these years, and that's where I make my noise and do my thing.
So I am learning a lot here. I noticed you've got music on Reverb Nation, Bandcamp, and you have got some tunes and videos on YouTube.
Right. The YouTube and the Reverb Nation are basically my sites. I run those. The Bandcamp is the official site run by the Roar 714 Recordings label. So basically on the Bandcamp is everybody that the label releases. Me, luckily, being one of those people.
So you sort of signed up to them as like they like your distributor or something, or?
Basically, they serve as a distributor. Greg Bielski is the CEO. He runs Roar 714 Recordings, but he's a pretty hands-off guy. Lets us do what we do. So it's almost more a distributorship with the prestige of having a small label backing. He does some publicity for the folks on the label, and he has a little bit of, the label has a notoriety. It's based here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So the name's out there in that region at least. So being on there, and myself being from Pittsburgh originally, gives me a little bit of a leg up, as they say, as far as just getting heard and getting my stuff out there. Like I said, the prestige of Greg himself and the name of the label adds something to what I do that I wouldn't be able to do on my own.
If I understand correctly, you can actually purchase like your albums or your tracks from Reverb Nation, is that correct?
CDs. I have 2 CDs out. So basically the CDs are available if you want a physical copy for some of us folks. I like to have the physical copies of things. I know the streaming is the end thing, but I like to hold it. I like to, if there's pictures and things and stuff, which mine don't have a lot of that thing, but I like to flip through them. I like to look at the lyrics. And I think that goes back to, even today, I'm obviously still a fan. So that takes me back to being, you know, a younger kid and just first discovering music when we didn't have internet and videos and things. And that's all you had was the album that was on the turntable or the cassette in the deck and the packaging that it came in. And it was a special thing. And, you know, I'm sure you did the same thing. I'm sure a lot of us did, where you would lay in bed or, you know, sit around the house doing whatever. You'd have your music on and you would have that album cover in your hand and you were just studying it, even for the 10th, 20th, 50th, 100th time, just looking at it and daydreaming. And, you know, I guess that's where a lot of it starts for some of us.
Can I ask you, like, what type of age did you engage in, like, purchasing your own sort of music and everything? Sort of how young did you start, well, as a listener of music first?
I was always a listener of music at sorts. My parents were very young at the time when they had me. So I basically grew up with music around the house. My dad was more of what they would call classic rock nowadays, being a product of the early 70s. And my mom was into the R&B, soul, which morphed into disco sort of side. So as a kid growing up, I got a little of both from them. As far as purchasing my own music, by the way, I still listen to all that stuff that my parents put in my head. But as far as purchasing my own music, I think that was back in 1977. My brother and I shoveled snow and we bought the Kiss Destroyer album, which came out a few months earlier in 1976. So I was about, it doesn't matter how old I was a young kid. That was my first thing. And Kiss basically ruled the turntable and the cassette deck for months and months and months until a couple of cousins of ours introduced us to Cheap Trick. From there, it just kind of exploded. By then, I was starting to get to that age where I was buying my own music. I was listening to my, you know, I had choices in what I listened to. So Kiss, Cheap Trick started it off. From there, it went to Black Sabbath, the Beatles, anything my friends handed me that I thought was interesting or exciting. We started going to record stores. Once again, back in the days before the internet, etc., you would go in the record store and just spend hours as kids just browsing through all the different covers, looking for things. If Black Sabbath, for example, if I liked one of their albums, I usually bought another product of theirs, sight unseen or sight unheard, and took it home and made a judgment afterwards. A lot of album covers were bought based on, or a lot of albums were bought based on the covers. If the cover looked cool, then it usually came home with me. 95% of the time, that process worked out pretty good. I ended up with some albums that had really cool covers that I just didn't understand the music, or just didn't understand, you know, the message of the music as a kid. But as I got older, went back to it and liked it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, before you brought Kiss, buying a Kiss album as however old you was, so it shows you leaning towards metal music. So I was just wondering, why did you buy that album? Did you listen to like metal on the radio or see something on the TV or something that got you into it? Like,
the Kiss album came out just as they were starting to hit their, what people would consider their creative peak. As a young kid, the makeup and everything intrigued me. All the other kids at school were talking about it. So that was basically, I may have heard a song or two before. I can't say for sure that I did. So that was one that was basically bought on word of mouth and what Kiss has kind of lived up to over the years, the image. But once I took it home and listened to it, like I said, it was a shared album between my brother and I. We were instantly hooked and just played it constantly. And like I said, one Kiss album led to another, which led to another, which led to another, and maybe indirectly started, I might not have known it at the time, started pushing me into a little bit of a heavier kind of music, though I think that came a few years later.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because like metal music was, I wouldn't say fringe or whatever, like, but it sounds like your peers were into that type of music anyway or whatever, which is, I would say, lucky or whatever, like you did, because when I was in school, that's right, people were into all different types of music, and you had my peers coming in with like Dio t-shirts and things like that. So I think listen to the music that your peers or people in school were listening to is one way that influenced you in the type of music you might. Why are they listening to this? Why are they, especially heavy metal? Because it was only a fairly small group of people I found that were listening to that type of stuff. And it intrigued me, so I was just wondering if that was your experience like.
My experience with the Kiss, Cheap Trick, etc., was just a tad before the times you're talking about with the Dio t-shirts, etc. That would definitely come. Kiss was probably like
Late
elementary
70s?
school. Kiss was the elementary school era, so uh, the older kids in the neighborhood at the time were listening to basically hard rock. There was a little heavy metal in there, like I mentioned Black Sabbath before. But my friends with older brothers and sisters, those guys were listening to, like we talked about earlier, what would be classic rock now, but it's on the hard rock end were things like Nazareth, UFO, Ted Nugent. Queen, I wouldn't say was super heavy, but they were around at the time. On the more classic rock end, my friends' older brothers, Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Foreigner, the sounds of the day sort of thing. I'm probably leaving out 100 bands, Styx. So I just started, something with the Kiss album, I guess. Like I said, music had always been around in my life. I've always listened to it, but there was something with the Kiss album, and I guess having a band of my own to listen to kind of opened that floodgate where now I was taking in all these different influences from different places. Like I said, back then, a lot of it was word of mouth. So if the kid up the street got a really cool cassette, was the big thing. I was coming in towards the end of albums, beginning a cassette era. So either one. So if a kid up the street got a cool cassette or album for Christmas, usually the whole neighborhood heard it within time. And like I said, we made the judgments. If we liked it, we usually bought our own copies, or oftentimes we would exchange our records or tapes. And that was another way of, just passing the music on to somebody else. Or of course, probably shouldn't say this out loud, but dubbing cassettes and giving them to your friends and trading them on the school bus and what have you. And like I said, shortly after that, junior high is kind of, I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but junior high was definitely where I started finding myself going into a more hard rock metal kind of thing. And by the time I was halfway through high school, that was definitely cemented in my head. In fact, I kind of went through a period there for about a year or so where all I listened to was metal. I was kind of rebelling against the classic rock I grew up on, and although I've come back to it and I love the heck out of it now, but I think that was that teenage rebellion thing where the metal bands that I was listening to then were my kind of thing. So no acoustic music, no old school music. It was, me, my heavy metal, and my bands, and that was kind of what started that whole thing that I guess I'm still experimenting now as an older kid.
I just wanted to ask you, because it happened more in the States than in the UK or whatever, that there was a backlash, like there was a backlash against any virtual new entertainment, like there was a backlash against Elvis Presley back in the day, but there was a pretty big backlash against metal as well at the time in the States. I believe that they even had Congress or whatever have some rockers in to explain why they shouldn't be banned, type of thing. Like, is that something you were aware of as part of your sort of rebellious stuff? Did you sort of identify with that?
In the beginning, I think I just identified with the music. In the early to mid 80s is when they had the whole, like you were talking about, the censorship. that never really. By then, I was already firmly entrenched in the metal, so to speak. So that didn't sway me one way or another. And I don't know if it had the same impact in the UK as it did in the US. But a lot of people, in hindsight, have said that all that really did was drive kids to go buy those albums. If you were already listening to the heavy kind of music, and somebody was on TV saying these guys were more violent, these guys were more gory, these guys were more satanic, these guys were more whatever, then usually the kids were like, oh wow, I got to check this out. And all it did was kind of help some of those bands and up the record sales. And as an aside here, this isn't really anything to do with censorship, but being in the States, I'm sure you read about this over the years, but the new wave of British heavy metal in the late 70s and early 80s, that was a big deal to us in the United States. Speaking from my experience in my circle of friends, we had certain little record stores in town that sold imports, which were generally picture discs or albums or singles from the UK, and they were usually metal bands that were, at the time, until they became entrenched in the United States, it was hard for us to find, and those were calling cards of sorts. When we were talking earlier about trading with your friends and sharing with your friends, it was always a really cool thing to get on the bus or to go into school and have something from the UK that was just something that we had started to read about in the magazine. So to have a copy of physically listened to of a band that we had only read about, if you had that, you were a pretty cool kid for a minute until somebody else came up with something different a few days later. But like I said, it all served to just unleash a whole bunch of new music onto all of us.
I was aware of that type of thing. They called it the invasion, didn't they? Like just like the Beatles was called an invasion, or you had the metal invasion. You had the big three. You had Iron Maiden, Saxon, and Judas Priest, I believe the other one. Yeah, those three. Funny, like that Saxon sort of died off, but the Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Judas Priest are both still making music, and I think they were going to tour. Iron Maiden were going to tour in the States, but they had to cancel due to COVID or whatever, because they got a new album. I think they released an album as early part of this year or late last year, something like that. They've been going for so long.
I got into the Judas Priest. My brother was the Iron Maiden guy, so we always had that battle in the house of which was the better band. We had several radio shows here in the States. One was called Metal Shop. Metal Shop played a lot of basically the early, I don't want to say the early, but the beginnings of the heavy metal here in the States before it came to big prominence. Most of it was metal from the UK or Europe in general. Scorpions, Def Leppard, Michael Schenker Group. The names are escaping me right now, but once I think of them, I could sit here for half an hour and tell you, I could glance at my record collection and tell you all the stuff I got. That's really where it started off. And like I said, this was right before Judas Priest and Iron Maiden were just starting to hit big in the States. So before the Dios and so on. And of course, you guys always had, you know, the old school British heavy metal, as I call it, the Zeppelins, the Black Sabbath, Deep Purple. I mentioned before UFO, Nazareth, Thin Lizzy. All those guys were, like I said, all in that melting pot of what was happening here in the States. And of course, you know through the metal history that the U.S. bands started picking up on that. The Metallica, Anthrax, those sort of folks started expanding on, because they were basically doing what I was doing in Pennsylvania. Same thing, if you read any of these biographies, these guys were going to the record stores and buying stuff from Europe and the UK that just seemed to be a little heavier and more of a harder edge, I guess, than what the US bands were putting out at the time. Like I said, in the US, that was the era of Kiss. Van Halen was a big thing back then. So when all my high school friends were listening to Van Halen, I was, listening to Merciful Fate from Denmark, and some of the other bands from the UK that I had mentioned. And that might have been part of it. Was I loved the music. Maybe some of it was to be, like I said, different in a way. My metal's different than your metal. Who knows? The minds of a kid. But
before we sort of go on to your music, one band we haven't mentioned that I thought we just from Australia, AC/DC. Were you into them at all?
You know, I always liked AC/DC on the fringe. I don't want to say I dislike them. They were honestly a band that I just never really got into. I love what they do. Um, to this day, I own one AC/DC CD, Back in Black. That was a big deal when I was in ninth grade. One of the biggest selling albums of the year that went on to be one of the biggest selling albums of all time. I loved it. I listened to it, and even the previous AC/DC albums and the ones that came after, because of course they're still recording up until a few years ago. But that was one band that I just never, in the States here, or at least in my experience, anytime I turn on the radio over here, I can hear an AC/DC song. So going back to my Back in Black, I bought the copy. I probably listened to it a few times. I haven't listened to it since. And I never bothered to purchase any other AC/DC, although I have a mad respect for what they do. AC/DC is one of those bands, people joke that they basically have been doing the same album for 30 plus years, however long they've been around. And why I would have to agree with that, it works. I mean, it always sounds like AC/DC, but it always sounds a little bit different from the previous albums or the ones that come after, but not by, leaps and bounds. And when you pick up an AC/DC album, you always know what you're going to get, because they never jumped on current music trends, and they always just did what they did.
Okay.
You're an AC/DC fan? Is that why you brought it up?
No. It's just that we were talking about Europe and America, and I thought, hang on, we haven't mentioned Australia with AC/DC, so I thought I'd do Australia a service.
No,
we'll
good
give
call.
them an honourable mention.
No, exactly. I was going to say the same thing. Good call, because they definitely deserve to be in that category. And I think, once again, back in the day, all you had was magazines for your information. So a lot of kids probably thought they were a British band, and then found out they were an Australia band, which made them even more special, I guess.
When I was in school, we had my metal friends. They tended to buy Kerrang. Did you used to buy the sort of metal magazines like Kerrang?
Yes, actually, like I said, we had several stores where I was growing up, or close by, that basically specialized in imports. That was the big thing back in the day. That's what we called them, imports. Like I said, music from the UK and Europe, and the fanzines and the Kerrangs were part of that, the British magazines or the European magazines. So I bought a lot of those. The fanzines varied from being a nice glossy magazine like a Kerrang or a Hip Parade to being a something that some kids or some guys typed up or photocopied with some black and white photos. And I actually still have a lot of those in my collection. You can buy those for 50 cents or $1 at the import store. And a lot of them usually had, definitely the ones from Britain, of course, would have the UK underground heavy metal, which, like I said, in the States, a lot of those bands weren't even mentioned in our magazines at the time. Some of them rose to great prominence. Some of them ended up having great followings. And I think the import stores selling the fanzines and us getting a hold of those fanzines and the metal sheets definitely put a lot of those bands on the map over here in the States. So
let's move on to you now as a musician. When did you decide that this is something I want to do and pick up your instrument of choice, or however you got into it?
Definitely around the Kiss era. Like
yeah,
I said,
so
once I got
the album.
Yes, for sure. Once I got the album, Gene Simmons was a hero of mine and still is, as far as maybe not a songwriter or a bass player, but for the image and for just doing what he does, Kiss in general. So basically, I don't think anything I do sounds like Kiss, but they are an influence in the way that was the band that sparked that creativity, where, like I said, I'd be holding those albums and listening to them and saying, this is what I want to do when I grow up. This is something that speaks to me and something that I think I could do or I want to do. It took me years until I guess we always had like a little acoustic guitars that my dad would get us laying around the house, but we never learned how to play them. we would just bash on them basically. Like a lot of kids, me and my friends in elementary school and junior high would start these little bands, and we'd be lucky if one guy in the band knew how to play anything. It was usually just banging things out. I started writing lyrics probably in around the same period. The first several years, they obviously probably mimic Kiss songs and things of that sort, and they, quite frankly, sucked. But getting into high school, I started to take it a little bit more seriously. I knew playing guitar was hard because, like I said, we had instruments laying around the house, and I never quite picked up on them. My brother had a drum set as a kid, and same thing back then. We never really got into it. When I did buy my first guitar in high school, I had it for a few months, and it didn't quite come to me the way I thought it would come to me, meaning you have to learn things and you have to practice, and it sat in the closet for a long time, and it wasn't until a year or two later that I kind of went back to it. When I went back to it the second time, I was in the service. I had a buddy of mine that was a roommate, a really good guitar player. We were playing one day, and I say that loosely. He was playing because he was fantastic. He was one of those guys that could listen to a new Van Halen album, and if he didn't play the whole thing, he could definitely start playing riffs a few minutes after listening to it. So basically, he would play, and I would plunk along, and he said, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't you try playing bass? What do you know about bass?" And I said, well, I knew what a bass player was, but that took me back to the Kiss days. I said, well, Gene Simmons played bass. What are you getting at? And my friend said, well, it's only 4 strings. You don't have to play chords unless you want to, and I'll show you a couple things. So, yeah, I basically switched from being a really, really bad guitar player to being a not so bad bass player almost overnight. I went out and bought a bass and an amp. He showed me a couple bass lines, and actually I was so naive to the bass at the time that I always thought the bass played the same thing as the guitar, I guess, in my musical head. He would show me a couple bass lines, and I had a hard time hearing them on the albums because in my mind, the bass was playing what the guitar was playing. So that was my introduction to that whole thing, that you had dynamics. The instruments were playing different things. I think that was one of the things that started me on listening specifically to bass, or more in general, picking songs apart and listening to the different guitar parts or the bass parts or how they were put together. Sometimes they played the same things. Sometimes they weren't even close to playing the same things. But I think that was all very formative in coming into play when I started writing songs later. Like I mentioned earlier, I started writing lyrics in elementary school. By the time I got out of high school, I thought poetry and lyrics were something that anybody could do. I thought you came up with a guitar riff and you grabbed a pen and a sheet of paper at the time, once again, before phones and internets, and I thought you just wrote down things that rhymed or things that sounded good and you put them to your music. When I started playing in bands, I realized that not everybody could do that. I played with some fantastic musicians that just basically couldn't write any lyrics, or guys that could play any song on the radio but had a really hard time coming up with their own material. And that's when I started to think that maybe I was kind of onto something there. So that kind of developed into I was an okay bass player, very rudimentary at the time, and still am. But I was more of a lyricist. So I thought I can get into bands doing that. In the metal genre, it's kind of a taboo thing to have somebody writing your songs. Most metal bands are very self-prideful on writing their own music and lyrics. So that put me in a conundrum because I couldn't sing those lyrics. So basically, bass became a way for me to be able to get into bands and hopefully get to present my lyrics, which happened a lot of times over the years. Because to this day, I probably consider myself more of a lyricist than I do an actual musician, although, I think I hold my own pretty well as a musician. But I could have been one of those guys that was born in the 50s or 60s. What do they call those? Those hit factory kind of guys that just basically shot off. You went to work, you wrote a few songs, you handed them to a producer or an artist, they took them in the studio and recorded them for you. I could have easily see myself doing that, just churning out lyrics, you know, day
The
after day
Nashville
after
thing.
day after day. I'm sure, you know, now looking back on it, I probably wouldn't be able to do that as a job, but back then, you know, like I said, had I lived in the 50s and 60s, that might well have been my profession.
Yeah, like the Nashville type of thing, where they sort of, it is business, like creating music is more of a business, there seems to be, than you know, bands getting together to create original music. You've got people doing it like a factory type thing. They write X amount of lyrics a day, and that's their job. Like, that's what Nashville is famous for.
Right, right. To me, it's not a job. You know this as a musician yourself. You have creative days, you have non-creative days. I've never forced it. If it comes, it comes, and I run with it and I work on it. If it doesn't, I have a love-hate relationship with my instruments and my music. Going back to what we were talking about, I've actually had times where I wasn't in a band or I wasn't actively writing, but I would still pick up my bass a couple times a year. But you know, over time, it could go from playing several times a week to only playing several times a year. I've definitely have had and do have a love-hate relationship with my instrument. There have been several times over the years where I thought about just cashing it in and selling off my instruments. It wasn't going to lead to anything. You know, whatever the reasons, or I was too busy working, and luckily I never did that. But as I got older and matured, I guess I changed my 20-year-old, you know, the mind of a 20-year-old of becoming a rock star when I grew up, to changing my mindset to being a person that just really enjoys creating music. Whether somebody listens to it or not, or whether or not I'm driving my fancy car and sitting in a big mansion or not. And I think that was a big turning point for me. I meet a lot of people our age that they say, "Oh, you play guitars or bass?" I used to play. And like I said, I used to be. Once upon a time, I could have been one of those "I used to play" people, but here we are, and I still play. And I always wonder what happened to those guys. Where did the passion totally go away from them? Luckily, I always maintained a little bit of that spark, and even when I hate doing it, I still write things here and there. I'll write down, you know, a line will come to me and I'll type it into my phone, or a riff will pop into my head, and I'll come home after work and pick the guitar up for 10 minutes. But anyway, for about the last 5 years, I'm kind of back into doing what I was doing as a kid, which is playing music and writing as often as possible. And like I said, that was something that had escaped me on and off over the years. So it's nice to be back and doing it again. And it's kind of weird to be doing it again at this age. I'm basically just starting to live out some of my teenage fantasy, so to speak.
Very interesting, because a lot of your story regarding the instruments, regarding like you know, keeping the music going and everything like that, that totally vibes with me as well, you know. And I'm in a very similar situation as you said just now, is really trying to push the music out as well, because you just think, why not, basically. I enjoy doing it. It's his own reward as well. And I think the more you do, the better you get, in my personal opinion. And I'm sure you find that you know, you get excited about your own music. You think, oh, I can't believe I just done that type of music well. And they're like building blocks to get to. You're not quite sure where the path's going to take you, but it's the journey is quite is fun. I don't know if that's the way you feel about it.
Like I said, my mindset over the years has changed. Yes, it's definitely fun. When I was younger, it was fun for sure, but I think there was a goal. Like I said, I think that goal was to join a band, write songs, put out albums, tour the world, be a rock star, so to speak, be those guys in the Cranes, be those guys on MTV and the album covers. When that dream didn't happen, it's easy to just, like I said, throw all that away. But as I gotten older, I rediscovered it in a different way. And that way it was, like you said, it's the building blocks. You start playing and you come up with an idea and you're happy with it and you work on it, and now you're real happy with it. That inspires you to pick it up the next day and do something else. And now, because we are working jobs and taking care of our kids and raising our families and doing those sort of things, the rock star thing is on the back burner. So now we're doing it for our pure enjoyment. And without that, basically takes away a lot of that competition or a lot of that fear to fail, I guess. Because I'm not worried about, kids buying the CDs or the record companies liking the stuff, because half the time nobody gets to hear it. So I have to be happy with it, and I have to enjoy what I'm doing. And when I find those people that do enjoy it as well, I think the sincerity and et cetera comes through in that.
I asked you to give me some material so that we can play it. Before I start before we do that, you are the author of your own music, and you were giving me permission to play the music on this show as part of this thing, just to cross the any legal type of T's.
Everything, you have my permission to play it. People can steal it, and as long as I get the credit for it, we're good. The idea at this point in the game and at this age is to get the music out there, let people listen to it. So yes, you definitely have my permission, and I'm actually honored to see what's coming up here.
of credits. Hello, we're back after just listening to Joke, Poetry and Commotion. I think I'll give my feedback first, and then you can tell me how wrong I am.
Might be right. All right, go for it.
So this is not the first time that I listened to it. I've listened to it quite a few times. And first of all, I'm glad that the subtitles are there, so I can actually, understand everything that's going on and everything. Because if you don't mind me saying, sometimes because you process your voice so much, I find it difficult to hear what you're saying sometimes in some of your songs, depending on
that's exactly where the lyric video came from. I'm not a big fan of the lyric video, but I actually started doing my videos as lyric videos just for the reasons you mentioned. People would say your voice is too many effects. It's hard to understand the lyrics. When I put the CD out, that was from the first CD, Spoken Word Stupidity and Other Shady Shenanigans, by the way, and I'm shamelessly self-promoting here. Anyway, I didn't have the budget for a lyric sheet, and like I said, I've always considered myself first and foremost to be a lyricist, or in this case, a poet, or whatever you want to call it. Both sound very, very pretentious, but anyway, just somebody that writes words on paper. So that was really important to me, that people understood what I was saying and not having it buried in a bunch of gimmicks and that sort of thing.
Okay, so to continue my analysis, I like the slow driving bass. I'm a primary keyboardist, but my sort of second instrument is bass. And exactly like you as well, I tried the guitar. It feels very foreign to me. Bass is a lot more natural to me, maybe because I like playing the piano as a bass line with my left hand, that type of thing. Anyway, so I really enjoyed the bass line. The effects on the guitar and the strums, I really enjoyed that. It's slower than you might expect for a heavy song, which is different but good as well. Most metal songs tend to be faster rather than slower, so this is more of a, as far as laid back, as far as pace is concerned. The laughing, I found at once creepy and amusing. It sort of varied between those two emotions. That's one of the things that I like about your music, actually, is like you do samples, or you do like these, you drop, you didn't do it in this song so much, but sometimes you like drop these samples in or everything just to give different flavour to your songs or whatever. I really enjoyed that around. So, but the thing about the laugh that I found, mind that it didn't sort of, it added something to the song without detracting from the song, if you know what I mean. As for sort of the meaning of the song, I find it's very dark. It's very dark, and it's very, I don't know if you call this, if this is a story that actually happened to you, then I would say that something's really, you've gone through something that's really painful like that. Whether you imagined it or whether it's truly come from yourself or whatever, it seems to be like exercising something that was hurt inside of you or whatever. That's what came out to me or whatever, because it's quite bleak, and a certain amount of self-depreciation there as well. Like it's like you're saying, like, and I find that in a lot of your songs actually, that you got this cynicism to your music. Whether in this case it's almost like a personal cynicism. I'm not sure if it is. You could tell me later or not whether it's a personal thing, or in some of your other songs where you're like either cynical or you're making social commentary on like barriers that people are putting up, or like masks people are putting on themselves, and lying to themselves, that type of thing. But this one, you're taking away that mask, and you're very, very, it's either yourself, or you're putting yourself in the role of someone who's really sort of looking into this relationship, and you're angry at yourself almost more than the person that you're sort of making these commentary on. That's what I got from the song, or the poetry in Commotion.
And you're not too far off bat. In this case, I think I had a person in mind when I sat down to, when the words started coming to me, I guess. I generally don't sit down to write. As far as my process goes, to answer some of your questions or your analysis, I hope, I go by the muse, as they say. I could be sitting on the couch or I could be at work and something comes to me. I kind of file it away. If I have time, I'll type it into my phone and email it or text it to myself or just save it in the notebook somewhere. But that's basically how it starts, is a line or two. Then I'll keep running it through my head and I get a line or two. In this case, I think it's when it started coming to me, I saw it kind of going into a direction where I started writing it, not really for a specific person, but some of this experience was still fresh in my head, and I know it came out in the lyrics. Usually when I write songs, there is some autobiographical stuff in there, and or there cannot be. And I'm a great imagination. I think that's part of the thing about being a songwriter, is either you could take an experience that's specific to you, but put it in a way where other people could relate to it because they have gone through it as well. If you could do that, I think mission accomplished. Or the other great thing about being a songwriter is having the multiple personalities or characters within yourself, where maybe it is autobiographical, but it's more blown up, I say, to suit the song, or it's something totally imaginary. I could be having a great day and just write a really, really bad feeling or bad sounding song, because like I said, it's not what I'm feeling at the time. It's kind of what's being dictated to me by the muses. Like I said before, it just starts coming and I'm going, I wasn't really in the mood to write this sort of a song today, but this is what's coming to me. And once you get that energy, I have to see it through. I have to work on it and just kind of go in the direction. You used some adjectives that I thought were fantastic, and I definitely don't back away from them. Creepy was one. I like that. I can't remember what else you said, but I basically agreed with all the adjectives, and that's kind of what I go for.
Cynical, I said.
Cynical, definitely cynical. Growing up on the East Coast of the United States, that we definitely have a sort of cynical, sarcastic type of sense of humor, which I think is found in Americans in general, but us East Coasters definitely have that. Folks out here in Denver seem to be a little more happier than what I'm used to being around. So I think it's a little mixture of both. Definitely some self-deprecation. That's something that I think a lot of us hide behind as songwriters. I think even a lot of us might come off as being very confident and secure in what we do, and some folks might actually sincerely feel that way. I think for a lot of us, it's that typical songwriter thing where there's sensitivities and feelings and things and stuff going on. Even at this age, I think sometimes I'm a giant teenager and I'm still going through a lot of things. Music is definitely a way for me to, I think you said purge, definitely a way to purge some of these things that are going on in my head, whether they're real or imaginary, so I can go on being a regular productive person in life, raising a child, going to work, having friends, doing all the things that regular people do. I've always been drawn to like darker, introspective music.
Like it's a sort of form of catharsis then, basically, where you're taking this negative emotion and you doing it, putting it into something creative, I suppose.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's It's more interesting than going to doctors, and it's cheaper than pills. Actually, just kidding.
Better for you as well.
I think for me, when I first started writing lyrics, like I told you earlier, I thought it was something that everybody could do, so to speak. When I first started, when people would come to me and say, "Oh, this is cool," or "This is that," I can't express myself the way you do. That's when I started to realize that maybe I'm onto something. Not saying that I'm special. A lot of us do it. So for me, it did become kind of a cathartic thing. Or like I said, I could take something totally made up and present it in a way. Let's put it this way. Sometimes I could start off with a piece of paper. Like I said, the ideas start coming to me. I could put myself in a bad mood by what's coming out on the paper. I might not have intended to do that, but indirectly it becomes a sort of catharsis because I end up going in a direction. Maybe these things were subconsciously on my head that I had to get out there. But like I said, for me, I think the idea is if I can get it out and make myself happy with it, or it is a sort of catharsis or whatever you want to call it. If other people could relate to that and say, hey, I'm going through the same thing, then I think I've done my job as a writer, and I take that as a great compliment. Like I said, I've had people say, I can't express myself the way you do, but you say things that express how I feel. So for me to be able to, I mean, we're all human. We all experience a lot of the same things. So like I said, I'm actually kind of somewhat prideful that I could hit upon things that maybe other people can't vocalize themselves.
Yeah. I was going to say that I don't like destructive, like music, like very violent or destructive music for its own sake. So when I first started listening to your music, I was a little bit wary, to be honest. What type of message are you trying to say or whatever? Like, that's just my personal preference or whatever. Like, and I realised that's not what you were doing. Like you were telling stories. You were okay. This is life. This is a facade, and this is what's really happening in this instance or that instance or whatever. So, as I would try to listen to the message that you were trying to get, that's what I got. And I do that to some extent with my own music, but I think you take that to the next level, to be honest. Sometimes it's almost like, I almost get like a horror type of vibe. It's that strong, like, to me or whatever. Like, I mean, could be because some of the stuff that I see in your imagery tends to be quite dark as well. Like, but just saying, when I first started listening to your music and evaluating your music, what was my understanding of your music like? Because you listen to something and you get an idea of what the music is, but then I try not to get a preconceived notion. Like, I think, no, let's listen. What is he actually saying? And as I listen to your music, that's what I got from it anyway.
Like we talked about before, I'm a product of heavy metal and used to play in a lot of thrash metal bands. So you can't have heavy metal without war, death, destruction, some of those things. But
no, but what I'm saying, like, I mean, a lot of the, like, for example, if you take like Black Sabbath or like Dio or a lot of the bands that were castigated in the 80s or whatever, they were singing about war, but it was all anti-war. It was going into graphic detail about why you shouldn't be going to war, like, and that people are being manipulated to fight in and giving their lives for what the metal songwriters would say, for evil purposes or whatever. So, I mean, maybe that's why they didn't like it or whatever. Like,
and I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I was going with that statement. Those sort of lyrics fit that type of music, and life isn't always pretty, you know. I write for people. I think some people listen to a sad song and they feel sad. Sometimes, I'm listening to a sad song and I feel sad, but I also feel uplifted when it's over because somebody else is going through the same thing, or I listen to an angry song and I'm angry when I'm listening to it, but same thing at the same time, I feel vindicated, I feel uplifted because somebody else is going through the same thing, and you know what? They're still here and they're still doing their thing. So I basically, like I said, I think I write for people who maybe aren't necessarily pessimistic or negative in life, but that is a side of life, unfortunately. So I think that's my purpose, rather than picking up the guitar or the bass and writing something cheery and happy. I like to think I touch on subjects that maybe are a little tough for people to deal with within themselves, and maybe hope to bring that out of them. And I guess the lesson to be learned at the very end, if I have any kind of lesson to teach or a message to send, is we all go through a lot of this sometimes, and you know what? It's always okay in the end. We get over it. The good times are right around the corner, and like I said, you get on with life. For those times when you are feeling a little down or a little this or a little self-doubtful, you put on some of this kind of music, and like I said, it shows you that other people are going through the same thing. We're not all running around shooting ourselves in the head. We find a way to get it out of our systems and get on with life, because that's I'm a lover of life, believe it or not. It's not always one of my biggest fans, but I do enjoy it. But when it gives me a raw deal, I try to find a way to make it productive instead of downtrodden, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying like because some of my music, especially like my earlier stuff, is exactly the same thing. Like, it is like a little bit annoyed that politicians present themselves one way and they are another way. That type of thing. Like, so a way that people wear masks and I like to listen to some of the like goth type of stuff, which tends to or metal, but goth as well, which specifically goes into like death and that type of thing, whatever. But yeah, no, I found that like I listened to that in the car or whatever, and I find that quite cathartic. A band called Paradise Lost, 1 Second, and that was a pretty dark album or whatever, like, but I listened to it, I loved the songs, loved the riffs, I'd be rocking out or whatever, like, you get out and you feel good after, you know what I mean?
Oh, totally, totally. I do that. And actually, I'm not, your opinion's your opinion. I'm definitely not offended by it. I like the conversation. Anything I'm hearing from you, I haven't heard anything new, let's put it that way, as far as my music. And the cool thing about Poetry Commotion is I do what I do. And sometimes when people do say, oh, the music should be more like this, or it should be more like that, or the lyrics should be more like this, or the more like that, the more it makes me think I'm on the right track, because I'm writing for myself. I'm not writing for other people. And like I said, I think I'm on track because it's all about finding that crowd, whether it be 5 people or 5 million people. There's always somebody out there that likes it. You got to find that person, and finding is hard. So what I like about, I think Poetry Commotion is polarizing just enough where when somebody comes to me and says, you know, I really dig this track, or I really love this guitar sound, they actually mean it, because I hear far more negative than I do positive. So that, I guess, if anything, it just emboldens me to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The reason we did have a chat prior to this that we didn't record. During that chat, I did say that the reason why I was attracted to your music is because you've done like this poetry or lyrics in a spoken voice, and I'd experimented that a little bit about that myself, so that attracted me. I liked your riffs and your bass lines, and as they said, I like your samples, so I appreciate you're on like a sort of production and where's he going with this on a technical level as a fellow musician, while analysing I just wanted to give you my initial impression, to say that I had to fight over that to actually appreciate the songs that you've done on the other side of that, because it was that dark. But, you know, just give you my honest opinion on my first impression of your music, that's all.
Like I said, multiple personalities. multiple characters, because if you listen to the two CDs in full, there's also a lot of tongue-in-cheek things in there. I basically just throw in what I feel, what I'm feeling at the time, and sometimes things do get a little too dark and too heavy, and I think you need to throw a little bit of comic relief of sorts in there. Believe it or not, for my dark personality, I'm actually I try to be a happy guy. Let's put it that way. I can't say I'm overly happy, joy, but I am a happy guy. And laughter is one of the more important things in life. If you can't laugh, you have nothing. And especially if you can't laugh at yourself, you're in for a hard time. You're in for a hard time. And so, like I said, even for all the, the heavy metal darkness and, things and stuff, there still needs to be a little bit of, you can't take yourself too seriously. So I take poetry, Commotion seriously enough. But like I said, you listen to some CDs, there's some tongue-in-cheek things in there. It's definitely very do-it-yourself. There's some mistakes. Of course, I go back and I fix the major mistakes, but there's some mistakes that I listen to on playback that I'm not sure. It changes the vibe to almost fix it, because it's not going to, so I try to keep it kind of loose and not so sterile. And while I love a good Steely Dan or Yes album or Rush album, very technical, we're all humans and we make mistakes. So I like to leave some of those in there almost purposefully at times, just to show that, this is rock and roll. This is heavy metal. It's whatever you want to call it. It's not going to be perfect. And if it is a little too perfect, it almost comes off as, I don't want to say fake, but almost being a little too contrived. So you got to leave a little bit of the human element in there.
If we consider ourselves artists, the fact that I got that initial emotion means that you've done something right, doesn't it? If I'm sort of shying away a little bit at first before I start really sort of listening into it, maybe, as you said, you've done something right, purely from like an art perspective, because art is supposed to evoke emotions, as a sort of general comment on on that side of things. Can I just ask you a question before I forget as well? I find that if I write stuff, I find it uncomfortable to put out music. My love songs, and the closer they are to reality, the more uncomfortable I am in putting them out there on YouTube. Do you find that? I'm not saying with love songs. That's just my sort of thing. But do you find that as well? Do you find that the more personal, the more you reveal about yourself, the harder it is to actually put that music out there?
Yes. Like I said before, I have a love-hate relationship with my playing, my songwriting, everything I do. So obviously when we're creating, we're writing songs and we're recording, we're going to listen to our same things over and over and over again. Sometimes to the point where we can't stand them at the end. But anyway, that as an artist, you have to have that enthusiasm that sounds great. I got to work on the next track. Upon listening later, something that you were just in love with 2 days ago is now something where you're starting to pick it apart. Like I touched upon earlier, the mistakes and things like that. So yes, I totally go through that. And then that's usually when I go to the phase of, okay, CD's ready, or song is ready, it's ready to be released, and now I'm second guessing myself because I have overanalyzed it. So like I said, I think I'm at that age and to the point now where I can at least fake my way through it. I tend to just, at least on the inside, pretend I don't care and throw it out there and see what people think. And I want to go back to your critique and your analysis. I appreciate that, because it showed me that you actually, like you said, you had a kind of on first listen, a preconceived notion in your head of what you thought was going on, but upon further listening, you were able to peel back some layers and see that there was a little more to it. And that's basically what I'm trying to achieve. So I think, to answer your question, yeah, I'm always afraid to throw it out there, because I'm afraid that people are going to do exactly the opposite, which they usually do, is they're going to listen to the song, and if they're metalheads or they're poetry junkies or whatever you have, they might find something in it for them. If they're not, they might just skip over it thinking, oh, I don't like that kind of music. I don't like this kind of writing. I don't like, the negativity. Where I think there's actually under the surface, there's some things in there to find if you actually take the time to look for them. And that's going back to your very beginning of this interview, talking about Laura's group. There's a lot of music on there that on the outset might not be exactly my type of music. On first listen, I might say, oh, it's, artist is talented. Second listen, I might find something else, but after subsequent listens, I start doing what I was just talking about. I'm peeling back those layers, and I'm hearing things that I didn't hear upon the first or second listen. And then when I do see them again on Laura's page, or hear them somewhere, I'm actually now listening with a different set of ears, and now I'm exposed to something that prior to that I might never even crossed my interest.
Anyway, just to go back to what you were saying earlier on, you truly are going back to the beginning, rather, because Laura's music is like the new import places where all the new music that not many people know about is, he's sort of repeating the cycle of when he was younger. It's just in a different manner, really, if you think of it that way.
No, it is. I always thought about it. It's kind of like a little radio station to me that I could turn on. I don't know how it is for you guys over there in Malaysia, but here in the States, the radio stations play the same things over and over and over again. With Keith's podcast and Laura's page in general, you never know what you're going to find any given day, any given hour. And oftentimes I've actually just sat there for an hour or two and just flipped through everything that people would put up that day, or a lot of what people would put up that day. I'm not going to lie and say I love 100% of it, or 100% of it is exactly what I want to listen to. But like I said, there's certain things that I look for on there and I definitely enjoy. And there's other things that are kind of the dark horses that surprise me, where, like I said, first or second listen, I might not have appreciated it. Or things like this, the people, the interviews that Keith has on his podcast, or even on the online version, people giving their opinions of the song. If it's the artist, I might look for what the artist is describing in his description, if that makes describing in his description, or even the guys commenting on it. There might be somebody might make a comment that makes me go back and listen to it again because it's something that totally went past me the first time. Maybe I didn't pick up on the sarcasm or the intent of the lyrics, or how maybe the lyrics were somewhat dark but the music was happy, or vice versa. Sometimes I'm casually listening to it while I'm brushing my teeth and I'm not giving it 100%, but when something like that piques my interest, then I sit down and I actually do give it that full 100% listen. And your critiques, that's what we do. We're writers. You did what I like to think we all do, is whether it's your music or my music or anybody else's, is you listen to it, and like I said, you start picking it apart, you start analyzing it, you listen to all the different tracks musically, all the different lines lyrically. I think it's all a big package, the artwork, the presentation, and I think for the average consumer, I think a lot of that goes over their heads, and I think that's why we have the proliferation of the types of music that we do have today. Some of it is very, this is what I think you guys would like to listen to, and a lot of people nod their heads and say, yes, this is what I like to listen to. It's very easy for them, and it is the kind of music that you could drive to work to and brush your teeth to, because it doesn't require a lot of thought process. I think
I don't think it,
go ahead.
If you don't mind me just interjecting here, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. It's just
not at all.
But it's just that it's not healthy to eat sweets all the time. Sometimes you need to eat your main meal, in my opinion.
There's definitely nothing wrong with that. I have times where I don't want to sit there and overly analyze the music. I just simply want to maybe have a beer and listen to it. But I still catch myself going, listen to that drum beat. I like that snare sound, or I like that bass. I think, and that's where I was going with that. I think me and you as musicians, and a lot of the folks in Laura's group, the majority of them, I think, are musicians, and there is a small percentage that are not musicians, but they're definitely music lovers, and that's what they're looking for. I think they're looking for something that's not just a cookie cutter type of thing. I think they're looking for things to either justify what we're all doing. When I hear other, well, I'm serious. I know for myself, when I hear other heavy guys in Laura's group or whatever other groups I'm in, I'm going, those are my people. I'm justified in what I'm doing, but I'm also looking for something different, something that inspires me. I might hear, basically, like we talked about, there's a lot of different music on there. So I hear things that maybe would never, an idea that, not really stealing it, so to speak, but an idea that might not normally work in a heavy metal or hard rock type song ends up working if I take it and twist it up a little bit, because I heard it in a different context. And then when people do hear what I'm doing, and I hope other folks can take this from my music as well, it sounds creative, it sounds original, it sounds different. And it does, because it's not, it's not the old fallback of what we would normally do. I try to write outside of genres and outside of, categorization, so to speak. Although my influences are there, but I listen to a lot of things that you'd be surprised that I listen to, because they definitely don't come through in poetry and commotion. And like you said earlier about the pop songs, I'm not a modern pop guy, so to speak, but I'm a big fan of 60s garage rock, bubblegum, and R&B. Love that stuff. Love it. 3 minutes. The musicianship's perfect. The writing's perfect. Singers, songwriters, all that stuff. It's great, but you would never know that from listening to a poetry and commotion song, probably.
Well, just wrapping up on this, disco type of music was considered like throwaway music. But if you listen to the musicianship of some of those bands that created that disco, the musicianship is incredible, like especially compared to, well, I suppose like the older people will say, especially compared to some of the stuff today, like Earth, Wind and Fire and stuff like that. They were true musicians. Like, it's just that at the time, like, because people danced to it and it was so popular, everyone was always after the next track, the next track, the next track. No, incredible musicianship on those songs.
Oh, definitely not throwaway material at all. Definitely not. At least not to me. And like I said, sometimes you just want to put on the jukebox and just listen to something. That's the kind of stuff that makes me happy. Going back to what we were talking about before, writing dark, listening to old school funk or old school R&B, or like I said, the garage rock or bubblegum, it makes me happy. It's the kind of music where you start nodding your head, even if you're having a bad day, your foot starts tapping, and there's almost no way you could walk away from an hour of that still in a bad mood.
Turn to basically the other side now, which is the more technical side. In what type of equipment? I'm interested to know how you sort of get your music out. And I don't mean in a creative way, and I mean in a more technical way. How do you what do you plug your guitars into? Have you got like stop boxes? Are they going into the PC without revealing too many secrets? What do you use to create like your vocal effects? How do you put samples into your music? Anything that you want to sort of share on the more technical side of things?
I have no secrets, first of all. Most of my gear is actually very old. I record on a Tascam 24-track digital, which records on SD card, which I then change into MP3s, etc. That and a few effects pedals, etc., are my newest gear. But the majority of my gear is from back in the day. I have an Aria Pro 2 bass from 1985. That's my main bass, which is probably, if I start doing shows, etc., is probably going to end up staying home. It weighs about 100 pounds. The basses now are about a quarter of the weight, but it's the bass I started playing on, basically. So it's like an old friend. It's comfortable to me. It's my buddy. We've been through a lot together. I have a BC Rich Warlock bass, late 80s model. I think my newest guitar, I have several acoustic guitars, several electric guitars. I think my newest guitar is about 20 years old. I have my main effects box. I have a Zoom multi-effects pedal circa 1994, 95 that I bought as a graduation present for myself when I graduated college. That's basically what I use. I do have some new effects. I have a digital delay reverb from probably the mid 90s as well, which I guess wouldn't be too new. My newer things, I have a pitch shifter. That's one of the main secrets of Poetry and Commotion. I was never a guy that experimented too much with down tuning, etc. Just out of the I'm not a gearhead. I'm not a big techie. I buy what I buy because I like the sound or I need it. So it's, you know, I'm not one of those guys who could tell you the you know, the decibel output and things like that. I play what I play because I like it. The pitch shifter for me was definitely a life changer.
Can you tell me,
you know,
sorry, can I interrupt you a second? Can you tell
Sure.
me a bit more about the pitch shifter? What is it?
The pitch shifter basically allows you to stay in standard tuning and go up or down without turning any knobs on your guitar. In a nutshell.
Is that a pedal or?
Yes. Yes, this is an actual standalone pedal. So that was newer piece.
So sorry. So is it like a wah pedal? That's what I'm getting at? Is it like a wah pedal where you could pitch it up when you put your foot down, or is it just like you turn the knob to put this thing and then you put it back when you want to, whatever?
You basically turn the knob to wherever you want to go, and then there's a switch on there that either takes the pitch up or takes the pitch down.
Right. Okay.
So it's not laid out in terms of like D's and F sharps. It's basically you turn the knob, you listen to the sound, and you can take it up or down, or you could do a combination of both. I use that, like I said, that if there's a Poetry and Commotion secret, I use that a lot on the guitars and bass, and definitely on the voice as well. I don't want to say vocals because I don't sing. That's one of them. I have a Soundbox bass pedal, which is basically a pedal board / amp simulator. I do a lot of my recording direct. I live in a condo, so it's very, I play through my amps, but it's very rare, and when I do, I can't crank them up. So coming across that was definitely also a life-changing / music-changing pedal, because prior to that, and I'm still not, we're musicians, we're never 100% happy with our sound, but prior to the sound blocks, I wasn't a big fan of my bass tone. It was always really dry and real, whatever you want to call it. This gave me, like I said, some different varieties as far as amp simulation and some different tones. There's settings on there like fuzz. There's a overdrive type setting. There's a smooth tube. There's a metal setting. So basically I can kind of scan through there, find something basically to augment that sound of just the dry bass. And you know how bass is, without a direct box or some kind of cabinet simulation, it just sounds kind of, I don't know the adjective I'm looking for. It almost sounds dead to me on a recording. It's just like a thump. It's just a dead thump. Where this, I think, adds a little brightness to it. And then other than that, I just have a bunch of like regular old, you know, stomp boxes that I interchange, you know, flangers, choruses. Even on my pedal board, if there is an amp, a chorus, or I'm sorry, amp simulation, choruses, or delay, sometimes I augment that with an additional delay pedal or chorus pedal. A lot of it is it's basically experimenting. Poetry and Commotion, to go into a little bit of what you're talking about and give you a little background, started in 2017 when I bought this, when I bought my mixing board recorder. I was going through one of those phases prior to that of, should I sell my gear? Should I not sell my gear? Should I keep the pieces I want and get rid of it and give up music forever? I basically decided to spend some money on a recording setup, and I thought, this is it. This is now or never. We're going to do this. And that's when I bought, like I said, my mixing board and the recorder. I started buying like some newer equipment, like the stomp boxes I was just talking about, or the effects that I was talking about. And basically, because I had that thing in the back of my head that I just spent all the money on this, that gave me the impetus to sit down and start playing with it, recording. Prior to that, when I was in bands, etc., I did what most songwriters, or at least what I imagine most songwriters do. I would sit down and practice music. I would come up with a verse, chorus, that kind of thing, and I would write out my parts before I even sat down to record. Doing it this way, the way it's morphed the last few years, and definitely the last couple years with poetry, Commotion, I basically sit down to a drum track first, although it can be a bass track or a guitar track. But basically, if I'm starting with a drum track, I don't want to say I don't rehearse, but generally I don't rehearse anything. I just start with my drum track, and let's say my next track is going to be a bass. I basically just improv to the drum track until I find something I like, and then that's when I start in my head working on it. So I basically build the songs as I'm writing them.
All right. So the drums, is that like a drum machine, or do you play drums, or?
I do not play drums. You would think that it's easy, but it's not. I'm a rudimentary 1, 2, 3, 4, but I can't do 2 arms and a leg or 2 legs at the same time. So my drums, either I have a keyboard with the drum machine on there, and as much as I used to detest drum machines and drum programs, which I still kind of do. I mean, for hard rock and metal, I think you need a live drummer. Working in my living situation, this pans out pretty well for me. So they're either drum tracks that I create on my keyboard, rudimentary, or free use drum tracks that I find on the internet or from other musicians, or a combination of both.
So like with your vocals, sometimes I can hear about, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, like a medley of voices. Is that like 5 different tracks, or have you got some sort of harmonizer type of thing?
It could be both. Sometimes it is just what you're saying. It's almost where I have a machine harmonizing with me, or other times it is multiple tracks. Sometimes it's actually multiple tracks that are each individual track is harmonizing of sorts, if that makes any kind of sense. Poetry and Commotion came about in 2020. Like I said, I had this gear. I started writing some songs. All of this was a mistake, really. When I sat down to write some of the things that were on the first Poetry and Commotion album, it was actually supposed to be a full band where I basically wrote some songs and played bass. I wanted to have a drummer and a singer. If you recall in recent memory, that's about the time the COVID thing hit and everybody got locked up. So that kind of forced me into just progressing. I've always noodled with guitar and keys, but that basically gave me something to do, and I started adding to my bass parts. I thought, rather than wait for a singer to come in and demo some of the stuff, I accidentally started speaking my words. And I thought, you know what, when a real singer comes in, this will give him an idea of where the words go with the music. He could sing over it and we'll erase it. That was the idea. All these tracks in these effects that you're talking about, basically when I did that, I hate the sound of my voice. Like I said, I can't sing. I don't consider myself a singer. I think I'd been told, and I guess I'll agree with it somewhat, that I have a good voice for, like, you know, doing radio or things like this. But I didn't like the whole, like I said, I was always a metal purist. I wanted to hear Ronnie James Dio or Rob Halford or some type singing these words. So for somebody to just sit there, blah, 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 speaking them, it didn't sound right to me. It sounded, I don't know, it just didn't sit well with me. I also didn't like my voice. That's where the vocal effects, etc. came in. It was really just supposed to be something to pass the time that I passed on to a couple people who took interest in it. And
you realized you were onto something then when you
started. Right, and I noticed that I was onto something that other people were picking up on, and something that was at least being repeated back to me, that it was different. So I thought, okay, I'm going to run with this for a little bit. And that's basically what brought us here tonight. I totally write songs differently than I did prior to Poetry and Commotion. And I approach making music differently. And as a person, because I'm doing things that are a little outside the box, it has exposed me and caused me to listen to other artists that I probably or normally wouldn't have listened to, that are also outside the box, to see what other people are doing. because it's, like I said, it's not a straight ahead Iron Maiden thing that I originally pictured. So a lot of this stuff that we're talking about now was all born out of necessity, thanks to COVID and other things that were out of my control.
And just to get philosophical for a moment, basically, it is a lot of the time, like and I'm talking to people who are musicians out there, basically, if you find that a door closes, if you do find that what you think is where you should be like a pop star, rock star, dash blocked, a lot of times life will open a window or a side door and you go in a direction you never thought you'd take. And maybe, if you believe in fate, or you just get an opportunity to produce something that you would never have done before, be original and create something totally different than you would if you're in just a band or whatever. Not to say there's nothing wrong with a band, because a band's great. What I'm saying is don't give up or whatever, because basically, like you said or whatever, you bought this equipment, coronavirus happened, and now you've not only, your musical life has basically taken a complete change in direction, hasn't it? Because like when I was listening to what you were saying then, I thought, oh, thank God you bought that piece of equipment there, because I would never have met you.
No, and that's probably true. Like I said, this was all kind of a happy accident. It was me throwing the cards down and saying, okay, we're going to give this one more go round. And oddly enough, I think I mentioned before, it was when I started getting left of center, or started getting weird, or started to get experimental, or whatever you call it. I'm not selling albums by the thousands or anything. I'm not getting 1 million views and listens, but people are paying a lot more attention to it now than they were when I was trying to be a serious, straight up metal guy. And so, like I said, a happy accident. And it's also given me, like I said, a new way of looking at writing. I could do whatever I want now. I don't have to stick to metal norms or metal expectations. I don't even have to be metal. I could do whatever I want.
Out of interest, have you done any like 12-bar bass playing and everything like that? Or
yes, but I'm a bad practicer, so I suck at it. When I'm in bands and stuff, I practice, because nobody wants to be that guy that goes to rehearsal or the shows that doesn't know their parts, etc. I'm my own monster, so for better or for worse, that's probably why I don't play a lot of cover songs. I find it really hard to get the discipline to actually sit down and do something like that, like run through scales or learn a cover song. I do it once in a while. I'm more the kind of person that I end up going off on these tangents, and that's what I was alluding to earlier about, like I said, with poetry, Commotion, with the experimentation and all. Like I said, I really don't sit down to write songs. I basically just sit down to experiment. I could spend a whole weekend or week and not come up with anything, or I could end up with a couple handfuls of tracks, or I can come up with a whole song in an afternoon. It just depends on what happens that day. And I think that's made it really fresh for me. It's made it really fresh for me. And if I do something like a 12-bar blues or a, whatever, or a cover, it usually ends up being my interpretation of it, because I'm not disciplined enough to sit there and actually learn the method and practice the method to make it presentable and sound great. I always have to twist it up somewhere, because it's the easy way out, basically. But it seems to work for me.
Shall we play this? This is a track that I've never heard before, and so this will be sort of like a reaction type of video. And
then, so going into this blind.
Yes, we're going into this blind. We'll listen to this.
1, 2, 3, 4. Past philosophy, past this, past blackness, past science, fire breathing, slow, broke out, hard, less, very neat, no one knows who it's all about. See, share the share. You should get flat. You ain't lucky every mistake. The loose one nowadays. Looking at worse.
By the way, any technical issues during this show have all been my fault. This is my very first time doing an interview, so please forgive any issues that I will try to fix in post. Right, yeah, so first thing, I gotta say that your videos, I haven't mentioned your videos yet. I like them, they're very arty, they're very avant-garde, and they seem to fit the music or whatever. So I think you should do more with your music videos, because I think it'll sell your music better in my opinion, or whatever. Like, because your music is so different, I think that if you, like you added this visual element, like you said, right? If people are just listening to your music for the first time, they might just drop it or whatever. But if they actually see the visuals as well, and they think, oh, this is a little bit, because your music is different, then you see that the videos are different as well. I think the combination of both makes more interesting. I just go back to, right, one of the things that when I was watching, when I first listened to scratching in rap, and I'd never heard scratching before, and I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know if I liked it or not. There was this video of like these mechanical dolls kicking legs like that in time, and they were going back and forth like robots or whatever. And it sort of sold me on the concept of this really new sound that I've never sort of heard before. And I think this applies to you, because I think your videos are so well done. Like I particularly liked I liked the neon person dancing, because it really fitted with the music, the like synthy type of sounds. But like that angled woman type thing. The videos are off kilter and your music is off kilter. So I think the Son of His Heart is greater than the Who. Yeah, I just think it sells the idea personally. So as a fan, I request you make more music videos for your music going forward. Right, so as I said, it totally threw me off, right? Because no thrash guitar or whatever. I like really nice funky bass line. I like the drums more like old school hip hoppy type of drums, or the old pop type of drums or whatever. I like that, and I like the synth. I like the synth. I really enjoyed that. Something different. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. The videos, I can't really take credit for. Most of that is stock footage, pre-use footage. I'm basically the editor. I don't consider myself much of a videographer, so you just gave me a very big compliment. I guess subconsciously I always tried to keep the videos different, like I do with the music, but once again a lot of that was just based on what I had to work with, although I do obviously try to find images and things that fit in there. This also goes back to kind of like the voice thing we were talking about. One of these days I actually will get a camera out and do a a proper music video, but I'm more of a recording artist, so to speak. First of all, I don't think anybody cares what I look like. I'm not a supermodel. I'm not trying to get my face out there. I'm trying to get my music out there. But it also, the free use footage, etc., prevents me from actually having to be in one of my videos. So I kind of like that, like you said, the avant-garde aspect of it, where it's not a straight up live performance video. I think you and I talked about privately in a different forum about some of the poetry and Commotion artwork, etc., has masks and masquerade type stuff. I toyed with the idea, and I'm still toying with the idea of if this ever becomes a live project of any sort, do I go out looking like I do today, or do we put on one of those masks or something? Like you said, I said that earlier, that goes back to probably that KISS influence and that influence I have within myself of portraying different characters with different moods or different feelings without, having to be myself, so to speak. So these types of videos give me that safety net of sorts where I can hide behind that and not have to put myself, John Ballistic, out there. I'm hiding basically behind a bunch of images, etc.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a visual guy and because I use stock footage for my type of thing as well. It's why I appreciate it or whatever. But I don't know, it works for me anyway. It really does. Just going back to your mask thing, you could change, you could have, I think, if you do run with idea, you use masquerade masks, and you could have different, you have some masquerade masks that are happy, and then you could have some that are sad with tears down. You could do that, change it up for the songs. That'd be quite cool. Or you could, and then you could do one without the mask. Yeah, I think that would be quite cool, actually.
All to be seen what happens here as far as that goes. I would like to play some of this live. I do use a lot of, obviously, like you said, there are some samples, there are some backing tracks, but I also try to write the songs in a way. I mean, let's be honest here. It's not very complicated music, so I think a lot of itself would lend well to a live setting. I just don't. I can't really think of any bands off the top of my head where this would work. I'll have to do some more research here locally, and I'm sure I could find some guys that are kind of in the same kind of vein, and maybe we can make something happen. But for now, I'm happy with being what it is.
Maybe trying to get it more into the underground type of scene rather than the mainstream type of thing, where people try experimental musics of different types. Right, I think that should be good for this session. You happy with that? Is there anything that you want to say before we finish?
No, I thought it was a great conversation. You gave me some good insight. It's just fun, like I said, sitting around. If we were closer, we could be at the pub having a beer together and doing the same thing and talking about the videos that are on the TV or the songs coming out of the jukebox, and I think we'd have a grand time. So the fact that we're talking about, in this case, mostly my music and indirectly some of your stuff, it's great. It's cool. I hope this thing that we're doing for Laura's group and with Laura's group, I hope it takes off, and I hope to see some other things come out of this. For sure. I do too. There's been quite a few technical issues on this, so I don't know. Rock and roll is live.
Hopefully most of it will come out in the wash or whatever, but I really enjoy myself. So to everybody out there, we will be taking this, giving it to Laura. She will be putting it on Talk in the Corner, which is a YouTube page, and in that will be links to what John Ballistic, where you can listen or purchase his music on Facebook, on Reverb Nation, on Bandcamp, wherever he is. Also, you will have a link to my YouTube page, so you can have a listen to the type of stuff that I do, and you can criticize the heck out of me too, rather than me picking on John Ballistic. But yeah, I really enjoyed myself. We'll wrap it up there. So goodbye from Darmin De'flern.
Goodbye from John Ballistic and Darmin De'flern. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast, and hopefully we do this again sometime. But in the meantime, I'll catch up with you online, and we'll continue our conversation, so to speak.
If you want to chat to us, hop on the Facebook page and in Laura's group, and we'll talk to you and everything. Or leave a comment in the YouTube section, and anything you want to ask us, we'll be willing to get back to you. Either me or John will keep an eye out on this video and make sure that we get back to you with anything else. And if there's any improvements, especially with the technical stuff, I will get on that. But if there's anything else you want in this format, there's questions I didn't ask that you want to put to John, and maybe we could do a follow-up interview. And John has agreed to interview me in the future as well, so that's coming up. So watch this space. Yes. Watch this space. Both John and I will be interviewing people in the future, and we hope that it takes off, everybody enjoys it, listens to new music, listen to the people who make this type of music, and see how it goes. John?
Rock on.
Rock on.
Darmin.
Goodbye.
Bye.